Hello! Today, I will be speaking to you about 6 of the most influential authors of Latin America. The reason I will be speaking about these 6 authors is I believe that each one of them added a considerable amount of cultural and literary richness to that region. The order in which I will present them is not necessarily in any order of importance. The order will simply be chronological. The first author that we're going to be discussing today is Sor Juana de la Cruz. She was born in Mexico in the 17th century, the mid-17th century. She was a self-taught scholar, a poet, and prose writer. Later in life, she became a nun, and she was one of the earliest women writers in Latin America and very influential. Her topics included things on feminism, religiosity, and other things related to that. One of her most notable pieces is called Primero Sueño, which is a long poem that is in the format of a silva, which means 7 and 11 syllable lines. I'm now going to read a segment of that poem in Spanish. It says, Piramidal funesta de la tierra, nacida sombra, al cielo encaminaba de vanos obeliscos punta altiva, escalar pretendiendo las estrellas. Si bien sus luces bellas extentas siempre rutilantes, la tenebrosa guerra que con negros vapores le intimaba, la vaporosa sombra fugitiva, burlaban tan distantes que su atesado ceño al superior convexo aún no llegaba, del orbe de la diosa que 3 veces hermosa con 3 hermosos rostros se ostenta, quedando solo dueño del aire que empañaba con el aliento denso que exhalaba. Y en la quietud contenta de ímpero silencioso, sumisas solo voces consentía de las nocturnas aves, tan oscuras, tan graves, que aún el silencio no se interrumpía. The second author in our series of 6 most influential authors is Rubén Darío, who was born in Nicaragua in the middle of the 19th century. He was also a poet, but he was born about 200 years after Sor Juana. He made a considerable contribution to literature in Latin America because he became one of the principal writers of the Modernismo movement, or modernism, that started at the end of the 19th century. Modernism was a movement that took place primarily in poetry and focused on many events and cultural significance in Latin America. They also focused a lot on Latin American pride and Greek and Roman mythology. One of his most notable works is a collection of poems called Azul. We're going to be reading a poem called A Roosevelt, which is to Roosevelt, referring to Teddy Roosevelt, and I'm going to read it in Spanish. It says, Es con voz de la Biblia o verso de Walt Whitman que habría de llegar hasta ti, cazador, primitivo y moderno, sencillo y complicado, con un algo de Washington y 4 de Nimrod. Eres los Estados Unidos, eres el futuro invasor de la América ingenua que tiene sangre indígena, que aún reza a Jesucristo y aún habla en español. Our third author in the series of Latin American influential authors is Jorge Luis Borges, who was an Argentine born in 1899. The time that he was born, Rubén Darío had already been publishing a few of his most famous works. Jorge Luis Borges was known in the Latin American world of literature for his contribution in the genre of El Realismo Mágico, which in English is magic realism. In this genre, he delved into ideas of fantasy and reality and how they would mix together. He was known for his poems and his prose writing, and his most famous collection of stories is called Ficciones, which came out in the 1930s or 40s in the 20th century. The fourth author in our series of Latin American authors is Pablo Neruda. He is a Chilean-born poet, born in 1904. His contribution to the world of Latin American literature was mainly political. He was a very influential diplomat during his time in Chile and in other parts of the world. And he wrote many poems on the subjects of communism, republicanism, and other political parties and things of that nature. He focused on the people, and that was his main goal, to advance the will of the people. One of his most famous collections of poems, though, did not focus on political ideals. It was a collection of 100 sonnets of amor, or 100 sonnets of love. And I'd like to read a segment from one of those poems. It's actually one of my favorites. It's called Farewell. And this section says, Amo el amor de los marineros que besan y se van. Dejan una promesa, no vuelvan nunca más. En cada puerto una mujer espera, los marineros besan y se van. Una noche se acuestan con la muerte en el lecho del mar. The fifth author in our list of authors is Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who was a Colombian-born writer who was born in 1927. He also, like Jorge Luis Borges, wrote fiction and was famous for his work in magic realism. His most famous work, Cien Años de Soledad, was published in the 1960s and went on to be an international bestseller. He became one of the most influential Latin American authors of all time and probably one of the most recognizable. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1982, and I would just like to read a segment from his famous work, Cien Años de Soledad, in español. It says, Entonces el coronel Aureliano Buendía quitó la tranca y vio en la puerta a 17 hombres de los más variados aspectos, de todos los tipos y colores, pero todos con aire solitario, que habría bastado para identificarlos en cualquier lugar de la tierra. Eran sus hijos. The final author in our series of 6 most influential authors of Latin America is Mario Vargas Llosa. He is from Peru and was made famous with his work of literature in 1963 with his first novel, La Ciudad y los Perros. This novel led him to a life of literary and critical success. He wrote a lot of fiction and a lot of political writings. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2011, and the Nobel Academy had to say this about his career as a writer. He won it for his cartography of structures of power and his trenchant images of the individual's resistance, revolt, and defeat. He was also known, much like Marquez, for his writing style that imitated journalism, because both he and Gabriel Garcia Marquez were journalists while they lived. Well, thank you for listening in. These were the 6 most influential authors of Latin America, and I hope you learned something. Thank you for coming.